Hello, and welcome to today's training for Skype Operations Framework, specifically on the asset for scripted user enablement. My name is Nick Smith. Before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about me. I am a principal program manager with Microsoft. I have been with Microsoft for 9 years, including 4 years in services and 5 years in the product group. I currently reside on the customer experience and deployment team, specifically the academy portion, that is focused on driving SOF learnings and ensuring that our partners are delivering SOF certified offerings to our customers to make best use of the Skype Operations Framework. I am also the author of the scripted user enablement scripts, and I want to talk to you today about some of the information that will help you to be successful when running these scripts. First of all, what is SOF? SOF is the Skype Operations Framework, which is a methodology that we've put together to ensure that our customers are successful in their Skype for Business online deployments. Through the years, we have worked on many Skype deployments, including on-premises deployments. And we wanted to make sure that we had a vehicle to take forward our best practices, ensuring that customers had the best opportunity for success in their deployment. So our team has put together the Skype Operations Framework, which demonstrate those things that we feel should be done in every deployment to ensure the best chance at success. You can learn more about the Skype Operations Framework by going to skypeoperationsframework.com, where you can download all the assets, you can view all the trainings, and you can see which partners we have worked with that are able to deliver a Skype for Business or Skype Operations Framework certified offerings. If you want to contribute to SOF, if you feel that there's something that's missing, if you have any feedback on what works, what doesn't, if there's anything else that you'd like to see us add, please join the community, give us feedback, help others that might have questions in understanding what we're trying to accomplish in some of the Skype Operations Framework assets or why we're doing that. The links on the slide will allow you to give us that feedback as well as join the community and help answer other people's questions. A quick training disclaimer, the Skype Operations Framework is a living framework. We do innovate on a constant basis. This asset in particular is already in V2. And so I will be covering today the training for the complete scripted user enablement. This training is being recorded in October 2016. If you are viewing this training afterwards, there may be updates to the script. So make sure that you keep abreast of any documentation that we have that talks about major updates, as well as when we make major updates, we will re-record this training session. So scripted user enablement, what is it and why do we need it? First of all, within the operations framework, this sits in the enable phase of our deliver phase. Once you've gone through all of the necessary planning and architecture and site assessments, and you're ready to finally move users online or enable users online for additional features, this is where you will be using the scripted user enablement assets and script. This is meant to make it easier for you to accomplish the goals of going through and migrating larger teams and sites once you get into kind of we're ready to go forward with the service. So why do we need a user enablement script? There's a number of reasons. One, it will take a lot of clicks if you're to try and go and enable hundreds or thousands of users within the portal. The portal is fairly intuitive, but you'd have to go through and do a license assignment, and then you'd have to go through and enable users, set locations, enable features. And if you were to try and do that on a per user basis, you'd end up spending a lot of time doing that for each user between searching for the user and accomplishing those tasks. The scripted user enablement allows you to specify those users within a CSV file and the options that you want, and then let it run, ignore it for a while, and then come back and see the results. I do want to call out that this task has been designed not only to enable thousands of users, but can also be used to quickly enable 1 or tens of users. The reason why I want to call that out is because it's very important that you have consistent user enablement and configuration experience. If you're going through and doing this in the admin portal, it could be very easy to miss a step, to enable someone for half the features or not complete enablement because you get distracted and pulled off to something else. So by using the script, you can make sure that people are enabled in a consistent manner and always have the same tasks done. It's very important when you get into the operate phase that you know that you can rely on certain assumptions on how people have been enabled. There are other advantages. One, license assignment. We've done some work in the script to relieve some of the thoughts around what licenses have to be assigned. We know what licenses need to be assigned for each thing that you're trying to accomplish. And so by defining those things within the script, we'll automatically go and look at the licenses available and do the assignment. The other thing is that once you assign a license to a user, many times there is a time that you have to wait between that license being assigned for it to propagate through the system and for you to be able to go and actually do the configuration of those features for users. If you're doing this on through the portal, you may do the license assignment and then get distracted and come back a few hours later and try and do the rest of the provisioning. By doing it through the script, in which it can automatically pause, validate for that license to be assigned, and then once it's assigned, go through and complete the process, it gives you the quickest way of end-to-end configuring a user. We've also added in the ability with this release to migrate users from on-premise to online. If you're trying to do this through the portal, you would have to go through both the Office 365 online portal to go through license assignment, move back to your on-premises infrastructure to go ahead and do the migration, and then go back to the online Office 365 online portal in order to complete configuration. The script gives you a one-stop shop to take care of all those tasks. And finally, it's a very easy way of configuring voice features so that you don't have to go through and find what options you want to go and assign to users or search for users in order to assign a phone number. That process in the portal is very easy when you have a smaller amount of users, but once you get above a couple hundred users, the process of going through and trying to find a user is accomplishable, but it's also something that adds time into the management of the overall management of your organization and configuration. So by using the script, we eliminate all those different time pieces and allows you to end-to-end configure your users in a consistent manner and in as quick of a time as possible. So very quickly, I just want to go through some of the prerequisites of the script. A reminder, all of the information in this presentation comes along with the supporting documentation when you go and download this asset. There's a Word document that includes everything that I talked about in this presentation, and I recommend reviewing it prior to trying to run the script, just to make sure that you've gone through and checked all the boxes saying I understand this. So on the machine in which you run the script from, there are three things that we have to make sure are installed. The Microsoft Online Sign-In Services Assistant, the Azure Active Directory module that we use for assigning licenses to Office 365, and the Skype for Business Online PowerShell module, which allows us to connect to Skype for Business Online to configure users. What we will do if we are connecting to on-premises for the purposes of migration is we'll use Skype for Business PowerShell remoting, which does not require any additional installations on your machine because you already, by installing these items, you will already meet the minimum PowerShell version requirements in order for us to connect to the on-premises servers. We also have to make sure that the user who is running the script or the Office 365 credentials presented while running the script have the appropriate permissions to configure all the different pieces that we need. There are two options to do that. One, they can have Office 365 Global Administrator permissions, or if you're trying to limit permissions for this user, they must have both Skype for Business Administrator and User Management Administrator permissions. This is because there are two things that we have to make sure we do. Assign licenses to the user so that they can use Skype for Business, and that requires the User Management Administrator permissions. And then configure the Skype for Business attributes, which is the piece that requires the Skype for Business Administrator permissions. So make sure that the account that you're using has these permissions, or you will likely get errors when running the script. Some quick assumptions when we're running the script. If any of these assumptions are untrue, chances are you will likely get errors when trying to run the script. First of all, we want to make sure that the user objects have already been created online or replicated to on-premise Active Directory. This is because I assume that users that are supplied in those scripts have already been created. They don't have to be assigned licenses, but I want to make sure that they exist in those directories. I will not be going through and creating any user objects within the Office 365 environment. Any users that are going to be migrated from Skype for Business on premises will already be enabled and homed on premises. So if you set that migration flag to true, I make the assumption that they're in an enabled state on premise. My assumption is also that at the completion of running the script, that all users defined within the input file of the script will be at the completion of the script homed online. Which means that they will either be enabled and homed online or they'll be migrated to online. Couple quick licensing assumptions. One, I assume that there are enough licenses to assign to those newly enabled users. So make sure that you have licenses available to be assigned before running the script. That users will not be assigned conflicting licenses. An example here is that when you are trying to assign a PSTN calling license, you cannot assign both the PSTN calling domestic license and the PSTN calling domestic and international license. If one is assigned and you try to assign the other, you will get an error. I will not go through and remove any licenses. So if you're trying to switch someone's PSTN calling domestic license or PSTN calling license, you'll have to do that manually because I don't want to do anything destructive within the script. So I assume that those aren't already assigned, or the license assigned is the one that you are also dictating within the script. I assume that users in the input file will have already been assigned to licenses, or that license will be assigned during the script. I also have, due to the logic in the script of what licenses will be assigned, right now the script is only designed to work with customers who have E5 or E3 licenses with the necessary add-ons for Cloud PBX, Cloud PSTN conferencing, PSTN calling, etc. Today, the script does not work if you have a government or education SKU. That's something we may look into in the future. But I assume that you will be using E5 or E3 licenses when running the script. Similarly, for phone number provisioning, I assume that you've already got enough phone numbers in the tenant. I will not be going and requesting any other phone numbers. I assume that you've gone through and requested the amount of phone numbers that you need for each location. I also assume that you've set up emergency locations already and that they've been validated and that they have a unique description. Our online service does not require that you have an online unique description for emergency locations, but I require that in the script. The reason why I require that is the easiest way for me to look up and associate the emergency location when enabling new PSTN calling users. If I didn't use that description, I would have to go and ask you for all the information around what the address is, and I decided that'd just be too complex for the input file. So I decided to enforce a requirement within my script that location be that location description be unique. In terms of infrastructure, I assume that if you are going to be migrating users, that the machine that you are executing the script from will be able to utilize PowerShell remoting to your on-premise Skype for Business pool. What does that mean? It means that you'll be on a domain join machine, and that you will be able to connect through your infrastructure, firewall rules, etc., to the remoting instance on that machine. So you want to validate that prior to trying to run the script to migrate any users from on-premises. I also assume that all the values in the input file are correct and in the proper format. There is some very rudimentary error checking on some of those input file things with violations within the script, but it's always best to make sure that those are always correct and in the proper format. Otherwise, you will likely get errors in the results. So how does the script work? What do I actually do? So there will be an input file that tells me which users you want to process and how you want them configured. At a high level, what I will do is I will process all the users within that input file to first go through, check licenses, and assign licenses if needed, making sure that we have enabled Skype for Business and Exchange at a minimum. The reason why I do that is primarily those who will be using the script will be home to online for both. And we need to ensure that we have Exchange in order to make sure that all the Skype for Business services are fully functional and that we get the most out of the platform. So I will go through, I'll make sure that those are enabled for each of the users, and then I'll assign them a uses location. The reason why I do this and I process all users for those first two steps is that there is a time period between assigning a license and that license becoming active so that we can then migrate users or configure. I would rather wait the time for that first user, making sure that that time is also being processed for all the subsequent users in the file, to ensure that we can execute the script to its completion quicker. So by assigning licenses, that starts the clock on making sure that those licenses are activated. I'll then move into the other phases of the script and validate that the licenses are activated before doing the assignment. The thought here is that hopefully by the time we wait for that first user to have the licenses activated, all the other users will be activated as well, and we can execute quicker. So once we go through and we do the first run through of the users, I will then go through and check and see if there are any users that need to be migrated. If that is true, I will go through and I will migrate those users to from on-premises to Office 365. Again, I will process all those users so that any updates within the Office 365 environment for those migrated users will propagate and replicate before we actually go and process all the other users. If there are no users to migrate, then this entire step just gets skipped. At that point, we'll get into processing all the users again in order to configure those users with those additional options that you have for voice connectivity. It could be enabling cloud PSTN conferencing, cloud PBX, either with PSTN calling or on-premise based. And then based upon the options that you've specified, we will assign phone numbers and report those phone numbers based upon the input file settings. At the completion of the script, there will be a report that shows both in the PowerShell window and then also saved to a CSV file that reports the enablement and configuration status for all of those specified users. This is where I'm saying that you can go and run the script, go off and do whatever else that you need to do on your daily basis, come back and look at the results to let you know what was successful and what might require some additional error checking. At that point, you can make the decisions of whether or not any users need to be spot checked or whether or not there are any errors that we need to fix. It'll also allow you to validate that people have received the proper configuration that you're looking for. And I will report what phone numbers are assigned so that you can then communicate that out to your users or different staff members as necessary. Couple of things that I want to make sure that I go through in this script. One of the goals that I had in the script was to remove licensing complexity for user enablement. I didn't want you to have to know exactly what all your licenses were and which licenses had to be assigned, and if it was E5, what it meant for what you had to turn on in order to enable specific services, or if you had an E3 license, what you'd have to turn on and what necessary add-on licenses were enabled. So in the input file, I just say, do you want to enable Cloud PBX, or do you want to enable Cloud PSD and conferencing? In the logic of the script, I will actually go through and check out the licenses available in your tenant. And if you have E5 licenses available, then I will go ahead and assign that license and enable the desired services within that license. If you don't have E5 licenses enabled, then I will assume that you have E3. Well, I will validate that you have E3 licenses as well. And then I will assign E3 licenses and then the necessary add-on licenses. So again, like I said in the beginning, I assume that you have either E5 or E3 with the necessary add-ons. Depending upon what I see available in your tenant, I will make the appropriate licensing decisions of what needs to be enabled for the user. At this point, I want to call out a few things that the script will not do. And this is very important so that you're able to understand exactly what the scope of the script is. One, I will not disable any already assigned licenses or services. Like I said, I do not want this script to be destructive in any way. So if you have a conflicting license, I will not go and disable that license. You will get an error message saying two conflicting licenses cannot be assigned. That way you can then go through and make whatever manual modifications necessary, whether it be disabling that license or changing the license as you need. I will not enable any on-premise users. I will do the migration from on-premise, but this script is very specifically designed for enabling cloud services. And so that will do the assignment and enablement for online, but this script is not designed to be run exclusively against on-premise environments. Today, the script does not assign any non-default policy or configuration options. What I mean by this is if you want to change the way in which people's cloud PST and conferencing options are, or any policies assigned to any of the users, that is not in the scope of this script. And so that is a different management effort that you would have to go through. The script does not port any of your numbers to Microsoft Online Services. That is a separate process. What you can use the script for is after those numbers have been ported, you can use the script for assigning the ported number to the user for the Cloud PBX with PST and calling services. If you will be using Cloud PBX with on-premise PST and connectivity, either via hybrid voice or Cloud Connector Edition, I cannot validate your phone numbers. I have to trust the input that you have put in into the input file for phone number assignment. So the number that you put in is the number that will be assigned, and I cannot validate whether or not that number is valid or true or available. So I'm really trusting the input there. So how do you run the user enablement script? It's fairly simple. Once you download the asset and unzip it, you will have a script in there called Enable Skype for Business Voice Users. There are only two required parameters. If you don't actually give me the parameters when you run the script, it will prompt you for those parameters. The first one is the Office 365 admin username. This is the account that will be used in order to assign licenses and configure Skype for Business. What you will do is give me that username. After running the script, you will see a credential box pop up in which you're prompted for the password. I don't want to save that password anywhere in the script. I don't want to get it anywhere, so I'll use the secure credentials PowerShell opportunities that I have in order to get that and then be able to pass that in for authenticating with Office 365, both for license assignment and Skype for Business configuration. And then I also need the file name of the users that you want to enable in the CSV format. I'll talk about that file in just a moment. But those are the two things that I must have in order to be successful running the script. The script is signed, so you don't have to worry about running any, turning off any execution policies to run an unsigned script. This thing is completely signed, but it also means that if you want to go in and make any changes, that it will no longer run unless you remove the signing. Whenever I do post updates, we get the script re-signed, and so we want to make it sure it's as easy to run as possible, and that will actually meet your security department's requirements for running the scripts. The script also takes in a couple of other parameters that I want to talk about. On-premises admin username. This is optional, and this is only used if you are dictating that you are migrating users from on-premises. If in the input file you say that you intend to migrate users from on-premises, the script will then prompt you for this admin username. You can avoid that prompt by using the on-premises admin username parameter, in which you can just specify that. Again, once that is specified, you will get a prompt that asks you for the password for that admin account, so that we can use it to authenticate with your on-premises pool. The same if you say that you're going to be migrating users, the script will prompt you for an on-premises FQDN. This is the internal web services fully qualified domain name of your on-premises pool. This is what we use to connect to PowerShell remoting. And so we'll need to make sure that we have that information if and only if you plan and in the input file and specify that you are going to migrate users. A couple other parameters that could be useful. As I said earlier, after you assign licenses, there can be a time period. It could be a couple minutes. Unfortunately, it could also be a couple of hours in which it takes license assignment to occur and for licenses to be active before we can go migrate any users or before we do any configuration. By default, I will always pause for that provisioning to occur so that we will go through and do the configuration. If for some reason you say you don't want that to happen, you can say pause for provisioning is equal to false. At that point, it will go through, it'll do license assignment, and it will attempt to configure. If it's able to configure, fantastic, it configures. If the licenses are not active yet, and it's not able to finish that configuration, in the results, you will see an error saying that we're unable to process that configuration, which means that you would have to rerun the script again for those users to complete the configuration after licenses have been active. I also allow you to specify the output file names. The first is the verbose log file name. This is a log of all the steps and some troubleshooting information that we have. By default, this is just called verbose log file .log and is saved in the location in which the directory in which the script is run from. Similarly, the results file name will be saved as results.csv. If, for example, you want to save those into a different location, or you want to specify a specific name for this run so that you're archiving that information, you can go through and specify those log file names during script invocation so that you don't have to go through and rename those files later. The input file that tells me what we want to do in the script and who we want to execute against comes with a number of different columns that allow us to dictate how we want to configure those users. Many of these are very self-explanatory, like the user principal name, whether or not you want them to be migrated. A couple of items that I want to call out though. Usage location. This is what we assign in Office 365 that says this is kind of where the user resides. So let's say you have a tenant that right now is a North American tenant, but the user resides in the UK. The usage location would say the user is UK based. And that's what allows us to say, okay, we're going to go ahead and assign them a PSTN calling number within the UK. We are getting ready to release what we're calling regionally hosted meetings, which will allow you to I'll have a UK user homed in a European data center. That functionality is not in the script today. So by setting a uses location, we are not actually saying that user should be homed in that other data center. That's something we'll look at and do in the future. So it's important to know that uses location right now only dictates where the user resides for the purposes of enablement and what we can configure for that user. The other thing that I want to call out is there's enable PSTN calling domestic and enable PSTN calling domestic and international options. These are what tells me which license we want to assign to a user. They cannot both be assigned at the same time. The enable PSTN calling domestic and international is the superset of the enable PSTN calling domestic license, and just gives them the additional ability to call internationally. So when you're doing the input file, make sure that only one of these is true if you want to assign PSTN calling functionality. At the same time, we also have phone number to assign, and that is if you know the specific phone number that you want to be assigned to a user, or phone number city code. When you are doing PSTN calling, what I will do is if there's a phone number to assign, I will try to assign that phone number. However, if that is empty, what I will assume is that you want me to pick a phone number from the available phone numbers within that city code, and then I will assign an available phone number to that user, assuming that this is a new phone number being assigned and you don't necessarily care the exact phone number that's assigned. I believe the rest of this is self-explanatory. There's also a lot more detailed information in the associated documentation that goes into the description and when you should use each of these items in the input file. I do, however, want to make sure that we talk a little bit about the PSTN connectivity options, because the script works both with PSTN calling as well as with on-premises PSTN connectivity via hybrid voice or Cloud Connector Edition. So the table above just kind of gives you a quick key, depending upon what your desired configuration is, what you should say within the input file. Important to call out here is that both options, if you have a user who is homed in the cloud and you're going to be using PSTN connectivity, they must have enable cloud PBX turned on. This assigns them the appropriate license to allow them the PSTN connectivity. What the difference is that with cloud PBX with PSTN calling, you are going to set one of the PSTN calling options, whether it's domestic or domestic and international, to true. If you are doing hybrid voice or on-premises PSTN connectivity, you want both of those options to be false. And then based upon those options, I will be looking at which phone number to assign. If it's PSTN calling, you can either tell me which phone number to be assigned, very useful in the cases of your porting phone numbers and you want to assign someone's previous phone number to them, or you can just tell me that you want to use the country code and I'll pick one. Also, if you're going to be doing PSTN calling, I have to assign an emergency address. And so the input file requires an emergency address description. If that is not included and you have said, I want to enable one of the PSTN calling licenses, you will get errors. From a hybrid, from an on-premises PSTN connectivity perspective, I don't have any idea of what your telephone inventory is. And so if you want to assign that to a user, you must specify the phone number that will be assigned. And then I will also ignore anything that you have in the emergency address description, because those calls will be going out your trunks and I'm relying on that address to be specified via other mechanisms. So that will not be assigned. If you don't want any PSTN calling connectivity for these users, just go ahead and say enable cloud PBX is equal to false. Again, this is not the entire set of options. but I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about those options specific to PSTN connectivity options. So what happens at the end of the script? As I said earlier, in the PowerShell window, you'll get a table that gives you the results of user execution. But above, I have a sample. It's only for 2 users. But in the results, you will see the user principal name, the license enablement result. So were they enabled, or did we run into some type of error, like not enough licenses available or conflicting licenses? Those will be reported at this table at the end. The migration result, which would be the user is migrated, or skipped user was not designated for migration, or maybe you were rerunning this and the user is already homed online. You'll get some sort of informative message there. The configuration result that lets us know whether or not configuration was even required for the user. In the example above, I was not assigning any voice features, so it wasn't required. For user 2, it was required, and so I went ahead and configured the user, and then I also report back the phone number that was assigned. This is very useful because if you're using the phone number city code for enabling your users online, what I will report back is the number that I picked and assigned to that user. And so it's very useful for then communicating those phone numbers out to those that need to know those phone numbers. If you are operating on thousands of users, or you want to look at this later on, or you want to just even say, hey, just show me all the users that had an error in license enablement. All of this information is also written to the results CSV file in the PowerShell execution directory, or the file name that you specified when invoking the script of what you wanted it to be called. Since that's in a CSV file, you can then process it in Excel. You can process it within PowerShell. You can read it however you want in order to go through and validate everything that happened with those users. If there is an error that happens during any of these steps, I will try and give a high-level error message that says, I couldn't accomplish this task because of this reason. That will be very, very high level. If you want more in-depth information into why that happened, that's where you'd have to get into some of the verbose logging that we have built into the script. And that's where we get into the script, the troubleshooting. Every time I run the script, I create a verbose output log file, or again, you can specify what you want that to be named in script invocation. In that, I will report out a lot of different things, including the steps that I'm taking, the user configuration or license configuration before I run the step. This is very instrumental in helping to identify why any of the errors occurred. So you can work your way back and see what state people were in or where the error actually occurred in the script. It's also a good knowledge piece for you to go through and see, okay, what exactly is happening. If you want to see this information go across the screen as you're executing on a user, you can run the script with the -verbose option. And so not only will that information be written out to the file, but it'll also be written out to the screen. This might be helpful if you just want to see things as they're happening in real time for a very, very small set of users. I don't recommend using that option unless you're very specifically doing troubleshooting. If you're stuck and you don't know why something wasn't working, you can either go to the link that I provided before, which is the feedback link, and post something there, or you can also email sof@microsoft.com, and that will get to a number of team members who will be able to help to understand what issues you're running into. That will also be very helpful for script feedback. Let me know if there's anything else that needs to be addressed or some additional error checking that needs to be put in. So that's a quick rundown of the enablement scripts. Like I said, all this information is in the documentation. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to go and provide feedback on the website. The guys who monitor that will make sure that I see it. We'll be able to respond and answer any questions. The next steps for you, though, are to go to Skype Operations Framework, download the material. That's where the latest set of scripts are. Review the documentation, and then very specifically for this task, identify users and create input files. I know that you can create that on a site survey. That's one of the earlier activities within the Skype Operations Framework. But I also recommend, hey, just create a small test so that you can test this with either some test users or some friendly users, some IT users, to make sure that you're familiar running the script on a small sample before you run it to try and migrate an entire site. And then once you're comfortable with it, start enabling users. Make sure that you're able to use this in order to do those mass migrations that you'll be looking to do in order to move your organization to these services. And with that, a couple of resources that I want to call out. Again, SkypeOperationsFramework.com is where you can go and download all the assets. You can learn about SOF, you can learn about our partners. You can view, you can give us feedback by going to the feedback link on the site. You can view trainings, whether they're product trainings or they're soft trainings like this one on the Academy section. And then also, please join the SOF community at the link below. This allows you to go and see what other people's questions are and hopefully be able to assist the community in answering other questions or helping educate us on areas in which we can improve. So thank you very much. That's the conclusion of today's presentation. Again, if you have any questions, any feedback, please use those links. I'm always looking to iterate and improve on these scripts. I'd love to hear your feedback and even your success stories. So thank you very much, and please contact us if you have any further questions.